The rain hammered against the Perkin garage concrete as 25-year-old Essence Williams grabbed the Mafia boss's arm with desperate strength. Her cleaning uniform was soaked and her dark eyes blazed with fear as she screamed words that would change both their lives forever. "Don't get in that car, Mr. Donovan." Blood dripped from a cut above 32-year-old Nathaniel Donovan's eyebrow as he stared at the young janitor who had just saved his life. Inside his black Mercedes, wires sparked where a bomb had been planted beneath the driver's seat. The explosion would have killed him instantly. But this woman he had never truly noticed before had risked everything to pull him back from death's door. Nathaniel felt his heart stop as he looked into Essence's terrified face and saw something he had never seen before in his dark world. Pure goodness. The other mobsters stood frozen in shock as smoke began rising from the car. "How did you know?" Nathaniel whispered as sirens wailed in the distance. Essence's hands trembled as she released his arm. "I clean your office every night, Mr. Donovan. Tonight I saw two men messing with your car, and I heard them laughing about tomorrow's funeral." "Your funeral?" Nathaniel felt something crack inside his chest like ice breaking on a frozen lake. This woman who earned minimum wage scrubbing toilets had just saved the life of the city's most feared crime boss. 3 months earlier, Essence had taken the janitorial job at Donovan Enterprises because she needed money for her grandmother's cancer treatments. Every night she cleaned the executive floors while trying to remain invisible. She knew the building housed Nathaniel Donovan's legitimate businesses and his illegal operations. She knew he was dangerous. But she needed the job and she kept her head down and never spoke unless spoken to. Nathaniel Donovan barely noticed the cleaning staff. He was too busy running his empire and dodging rival gangs and managing millions in dirty money. His father had built the Donovan crime family, and Nathaniel had expanded it into something even more powerful and ruthless. Women threw themselves at him because of his money and power. Men feared him because of his reputation for cold brutality. But no one really knew Nathaniel. No one saw past the expensive suits and the violence and the wall he had built around his heart after his mother was murdered when he was 12. Essence would clean his office last because it was the biggest, and she would look at the photos on his desk. There was one of a young boy with a beautiful woman, and even through the glass frame she could see the love in their eyes. She wondered what had happened to turn that smiling boy into the hardest man in the city. She would pray for him sometimes while scrubbing his floors. She prayed that somehow God would reach into his darkness and pull him toward the light. The night of the bombing changed everything between them. Nathaniel insisted on personally thanking Essence and offered her money, which she quietly refused. "I don't want a reward, Mr. Donovan. I just did what anyone should do." But they both knew that wasn't true. In Nathaniel's world, nobody did anything without expecting something in return. Her refusal to take his money confused him and intrigued him and made him want to know more about this mysterious janitor with kind eyes. He began staying late at the office just to see her. At first, Essence was terrified, thinking she had done something wrong. But slowly Nathaniel began talking to her while she cleaned. He asked about her life and her dreams and why she worked nights. She told him about her grandmother who had raised her after her parents died in a car crash. She told him about her dream of becoming a teacher so she could help children who grew up in rough neighborhoods like she did. She told him things she had never told anyone because something about his lonely eyes made her want to ease his pain. And Nathaniel found himself sharing parts of his story too. He told her about his mother's murder and how his father had turned him hard and cold. He told her about the weight of leading men who would kill or die on his command. He told her he couldn't remember the last time he had slept through the night without nightmares. Their late-night conversations became the highlight of both their days. Nathaniel would bring coffee for Essence and sit on his desk while she cleaned, and they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. The other janitors noticed. Nathaniel's men noticed. Whispers spread through both their worlds. What was the brutal Mafia boss doing spending time with a poor cleaning girl? But neither Nathaniel nor Essence cared about the whispers because something beautiful and unexpected was growing between them. It was a friendship built on honesty in a world full of lies. Nathaniel started to change. His men saw it first. He became less quick to anger and more thoughtful in his decisions. He started questioning the violence that had always been his first solution. Essence saw it too, and her heart swelled with hope that maybe her prayers were being answered. Maybe this dangerous man could find redemption. Maybe love could bloom in the darkest places. Because she was falling in love with him, and that terrified her more than anything in her life. How could she love a man whose hands were stained with blood? How could she love someone whose world was so opposite to everything she believed in? But her heart didn't care about logic or danger or the impossible gap between their lives. Nathaniel realized he loved Essence on a cold November night when she didn't show up for work. Panic seized him like nothing he had ever felt. He called the janitorial company and learned that Essence's grandmother had been rushed to the hospital. Nathaniel drove to the county hospital, breaking every traffic law. He found Essence in the waiting room with tears streaming down her face, and without thinking he pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against his chest and sobbed while he held her and promised everything would be okay. Nathaniel paid for the best doctors and the experimental treatment that insurance wouldn't cover. He paid for private rooms and round-the-clock care. When Essence tried to protest, he simply said, "Your grandmother is important to you, which makes her important to me." The grandmother, Miss Ruth Williams, was a wise woman who had lived through segregation and poverty and loss. She took one look at how Nathaniel gazed at her granddaughter and saw the truth. This powerful man loved Essence with his whole scarred heart. Miss Ruth called Nathaniel to her bedside one afternoon while Essence was getting coffee. She took his hand and said, "I know who you are, young man. I know what you do. But I also see who you could become. My Essence has a gift for seeing the good in people, even when they can't see it themselves. Don't waste the second chance she's giving you." Nathaniel felt tears burn his eyes for the first time since childhood. "I don't deserve her, Miss Ruth." "No, you don't," the old woman agreed. "But love isn't about deserving. It's about becoming better for the person who believes in you." Miss Ruth's health improved with the treatment, and she was released from the hospital in time for Christmas. Nathaniel had never celebrated Christmas since his mother died, but Essence invited him to their small apartment for dinner. He showed up with arms full of gifts and groceries, and for the first time in 20 years, he felt what it was like to be part of a family. They decorated a small tree and sang carols, and Miss Ruth made her famous sweet potato pie. Nathaniel sat at their worn kitchen table and felt more at home than he ever had in his mansion. That night after Miss Ruth went to bed, Nathaniel and Essence sat on the tiny balcony under the stars. The cold air made their breath visible, and Nathaniel draped his coat around Essence's shoulders. She looked up at him with those eyes that saw straight into his soul and whispered, "I love you, Nathaniel Donovan. I know I shouldn't. I know it's crazy. But I love you." Nathaniel cupped her face in his hands like she was the most precious thing in the world. "I love you too, Essence Williams. You've saved my life in every way a person can be saved." He kissed her then, and it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. For the first time, both of them believed that maybe happy endings were possible even for people like them. But happiness is fragile, especially in Nathaniel's world. His lieutenant, Victor Santos, had watched Nathaniel's transformation with growing anger. Victor had been with the Donovan family for 15 years, and he believed Nathaniel was going soft. The other crime families were noticing too. They saw weakness, and weakness in their world meant opportunity. Victor began plotting behind Nathaniel's back. He made deals with rival gangs and skimmed money, and slowly built a case for why Nathaniel needed to be removed as boss. The breaking point came when Nathaniel announced he was getting out of the drug trade. Drugs had been the family's biggest earner for decades, but Nathaniel said he was done poisoning communities. Essence had shown him what drugs did to neighborhoods like the one she grew up in. She had shown him the children who lost parents to addiction and the families torn apart by violence over street corners. Nathaniel told his men they would focus on their legitimate businesses and phase out the illegal operations. It would mean less money, but Nathaniel didn't care anymore. He had something more valuable than money. He had Essence and the hope of a different future. But Victor and others saw this as betrayal. They called a meeting without Nathaniel and voted to take him out. "You're either with us or against us," Victor told the assembled mobsters, and most of them sided with him, because they cared more about profit than loyalty. Essence sensed something was wrong before Nathaniel did. She saw the way his men looked at him now, with calculation instead of respect. She overheard whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Her grandmother's gift for reading people had passed down to her, and every instinct screamed danger. She tried to warn Nathaniel, but he assured her everything was fine. He trusted his men, especially Victor, who had been like a brother to him. But Essence couldn't shake the feeling of dread that followed her everywhere. She started staying later at the office and watching more carefully. She befriended the security guards and learned their schedules. She paid attention to who came and went from the building at odd hours. And one night her vigilance paid off. She was cleaning near the conference room when she heard Victor's voice. "Tomorrow night when Nathaniel leaves the restaurant, we make our move. It has to look like the Sanchez cartel finally got him. Quick and clean, and then I take over." Essence's blood turned to ice. She pressed herself against the wall and listened to them plan Nathaniel's murder in cold detail. They would shoot him as he left his favorite restaurant and plant evidence pointing to his rivals. By the time police figured out the truth, Victor would be the new boss and Nathaniel would be dead. Essence ran. She grabbed her things and rushed to Nathaniel's house, breaking every rule about their relationship remaining secret. His security team tried to stop her, but she screamed until Nathaniel came down and ordered them to let her through. In his study, she told him everything she had heard. Nathaniel's face went dark with fury and betrayal. Victor, his friend, his brother, planning to kill him like he was nothing. Nathaniel wanted to confront them immediately, but Essence grabbed his hands. "No, Nathaniel. If you confront them now, they'll just move up their timeline or deny everything. We need to be smart. We need to get you somewhere safe and figure out who we can trust." Nathaniel looked at this brave woman who kept saving his life and made a decision that went against everything he had ever known. "Okay, we do this your way." They spent the night planning. Nathaniel contacted the 3 men in his organization he knew were still loyal. He called his lawyer and his accountant. If he was going to survive this, he needed to be strategic, not just strong. Essence stayed by his side, the whole time offering ideas and support. She had no experience with this world, but she had something more valuable. She had clarity that came from not being corrupted by years of violence and betrayal. The next evening, Nathaniel went to the restaurant as planned. But he wasn't alone. FBI agents surrounded the building because Nathaniel had made a deal. He would testify against his entire organization, including Victor, in exchange for immunity and witness protection. It was the only way out that didn't end in more bloodshed. When Victor and his men arrived to kill Nathaniel, they found themselves surrounded. The look of shock on Victor's face would have been satisfying if it wasn't so sad. "You betrayed the family," Victor screamed as agents cuffed him. "No," Nathaniel said quietly. "You betrayed me when you forgot that loyalty is supposed to go both ways." The arrests made national news. The Donovan crime family empire crumbled in one night. Nathaniel testified for weeks, and his testimony brought down not just his organization, but 3 other crime families and corrupt officials. The prosecutor called it the biggest organized crime bust in the city's history. Through it all, Essence stood by Nathaniel. She sat in the courtroom every day where he could see her. She was his anchor when the guilt of his past crimes threatened to drown him. She reminded him that redemption was possible when he wanted to give up. And when it was finally over, when Nathaniel had served his reduced sentence of 18 months for cooperation, she was there waiting for him at the prison gates. They entered witness protection together. Nathaniel had asked Essence to marry him the week before his sentencing, and she had said yes without hesitation. Miss Ruth gave them her blessing, saying she had prayed for a miracle in Nathaniel's life, and Essence was that miracle. They moved to a small town in Montana, where nobody knew who they were. Nathaniel became Nathan Carter and worked construction. Essence became a teacher's aide while finishing her degree online. They lived in a modest house with a big backyard and adopted a dog named Hope. It was simple and quiet, and the opposite of everything Nathaniel's old life had been. Some days were hard. Nathaniel had nightmares about the violence of his past. He struggled with guilt over the people he had hurt. But Essence was always there reminding him that his past didn't define his future. She showed him that every day was a chance to choose differently, to be better, to build instead of destroy. Miss Ruth came to visit often and filled their home with laughter and wisdom. She lived to see Essence graduate with her teaching degree and get her first classroom. She lived to see Nathaniel volunteer at the youth center, teaching kids about making better choices than he had made. She lived to see them truly happy. On a spring morning 2 years after leaving witness protection, Nathaniel and Essence stood in their backyard watching the sunrise. Essence rested her hand on her growing belly where their daughter was growing. They had decided to name her Ruth after the grandmother who had passed peacefully in her sleep the month before. Nathaniel wrapped his arms around his wife and thought about the impossible journey that had brought them here. From the night Essence had grabbed his arm and saved his life to this moment of perfect peace. "You know what's crazy?" he said softly. "What's that, baby?" Essence replied. "I used to think power came from making people fear you. I thought respect meant being the toughest guy in the room. But you taught me that real strength is being vulnerable. Real power is choosing love when hate would be easier. Real respect comes from living with integrity even when no one's watching." Essence turned in his arms and kissed him. "And you taught me that no one is beyond redemption. You taught me that love really can change everything. Even a mafia boss." "Especially a mafia boss," Nathaniel laughed. They stood there together watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Two people from completely different worlds who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk toward the light together. Nathaniel thought about the young boy he had been before tragedy hardened his heart. He thought about his mother who had taught him kindness before she was taken from him. He liked to think she would be proud of the man he had become. Not the crime boss, but the husband and father and community member who showed up every day trying to do better. Essence thought about all the nights she had prayed while cleaning Nathaniel's office. She had asked God to reach into his darkness, and somehow those prayers had been answered in the most unexpected way. Not with lightning bolts or angels, but with late-night conversations and honest vulnerability and the slow building of trust. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real. It had scars and struggles and hard moments. But it also had joy and growth, and the kind of love that transforms people from the inside out. Nathaniel went back to work that day with dirt under his nails instead of blood on his hands. Essence went to her classroom and taught children that everyone deserves a second chance. And their daughter grew in a home filled with love and honesty, and the understanding that your beginning doesn't have to be your ending. The first year of their new life tested them in ways they hadn't expected. Nathaniel struggled to adjust to working with his hands and taking orders from a foreman who knew nothing about his past. Sometimes he would come home exhausted and frustrated, and Essence would find him sitting in the dark, wrestling with memories of when he commanded respect with just a look. On those nights, she would sit beside him and hold his hand and remind him why they had chosen this path. "You're building things now instead of breaking them," she would say. "You're creating instead of destroying. That matters, Nathaniel. That means something." And slowly he began to find pride in his work. He learned to appreciate the simple satisfaction of framing a house or laying a foundation. His co-workers liked him because he worked hard and never complained. They had no idea that Nathan Carter had once been Nathaniel Donovan, who controlled half the city's underworld. To them, he was just a good guy who always brought extra coffee and helped anyone who needed it. Essence thrived in her new role. Teaching had always been her calling, and finally she had the time and resources to pursue it properly. She worked with children who reminded her of herself. Kids from broken homes who needed someone to believe in them. She poured into them the same faith and encouragement that had changed Nathaniel's life. Her principal noticed her gift and often asked her to mentor the most difficult students, the ones everyone else had given up on. One afternoon, Essence came home to find Nathaniel on the phone with a voice she didn't recognize. His face was pale and his hands shook as he ended the call. "Baby, what's wrong?" she asked, rushing to his side. Nathaniel pulled her close and took a deep breath. "That was the FBI. Victor escaped during a prison transfer last week. They think he might be looking for me." Fear gripped Essence's heart, but she forced herself to stay calm. "What do we do?" "The agent said they're increasing security around us. They don't think Victor knows where we are, but they're taking precautions. We might need to move again." Essence thought about the life they had built. Her classroom, their home, the friends they had made, the community that had welcomed them. Moving meant starting over again. But staying might mean putting everyone around them in danger. That night they lay in bed holding each other while the weight of their past pressed down on them. "I'm so sorry," Nathaniel whispered. "I brought this into your life." Essence lifted her head to look at him. "You didn't bring danger into my life, Nathaniel. You brought love. And love is always worth the risk. Whatever happens, we face it together." For 3 weeks they lived in a state of constant tension. Federal agents watched their house. Nathaniel insisted on driving Essence to work every day. They jumped at unexpected sounds and checked over their shoulders constantly. Then one night Essence woke to find Nathaniel's side of the bed empty. She found him in the nursery they had been preparing, staring at the half-painted walls. "I can't do this to you," Nathaniel said when he heard her enter. "I can't put you and our baby in danger because of my past. Maybe you'd be safer if I left. If I drew Victor away from here." Essence felt anger flash through her like lightning. "Nathaniel Donovan, you listen to me. We are not doing this. You are not running off to play hero and leave me behind. We are a team. We face things together or not at all. Do you understand me?" Nathaniel turned to her with tears in his eyes. "I love you so much, Essence. The thought of anything happening to you or our baby because of me, I couldn't survive that." "Then we make sure nothing happens," Essence said firmly. "We trust the FBI. We stay alert. We keep living our lives because that's what courage looks like. It's not running toward danger or away from it. It's standing your ground and refusing to let fear win." Her words steadied him. They spent the rest of the night talking and planning and reminding each other of all they had overcome already. If they could survive betrayal and prosecution and starting over, they could survive this too. The next morning brought unexpected news. Victor had been caught trying to cross into Canada. He was back in custody facing additional charges for escape and 2 murders he committed while on the run. The threat was over. Nathaniel and Essence held each other and cried tears of relief. They could stay in their home. Their daughter would grow up safe. Years later, Nathaniel would sometimes speak at schools about his past. He didn't glorify the crime or the violence. He talked honestly about the pain he caused and the emptiness of that life. And he talked about Essence, about how one person's courage and faith had given him permission to imagine a different future. The kids would ask if he ever missed the money or the power. Nathaniel would smile and say, "I traded everything I had for everything I needed, and I got the better deal. Because all the money in the world couldn't buy what I have now: peace, purpose, real love, a clear conscience. Those things are worth more than any empire. When Essence heard him speak, she would cry every time. Not sad tears, but grateful ones. Because she had witnessed the miracle of transformation. She had seen a man trapped in darkness find his way to light. She had learned that love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about choosing to see the good in someone, and believing in who they could become. Their story spread quietly through their small town. The construction worker and the teacher who loved each other with rare devotion. People didn't know about Nathaniel's past or the dramatic way they met. They just saw two people who treated each other with respect and kindness, and who made their community better by being in it. Nathaniel and Essence taught their daughter Ruth that people are not defined by their worst moments. They taught her that courage means standing up for what's right, even when it's dangerous. They taught her that love is the most powerful force in the universe because it has the power to change hearts and heal wounds and bridge impossible divides. Little Ruth grew up hearing the story of how her mama saved her daddy's life. How a janitor saw past a mafia boss's hard exterior to the hurting soul beneath. How her daddy chose to leave behind everything he knew because her mama showed him there was a better way to live. It became Ruth's favorite bedtime story. Tell me again about the night in the Perkin garage, she would beg. Tell me how Mama grabbed Daddy's arm. Tell me about the bomb and how God used Mama to save Daddy. And Nathaniel would tell the story with Essence curled up beside them both. He never left out the hard parts or pretended he had been a good person back then. He wanted Ruth to understand that transformation is possible, but it requires honesty about where you've been. Each time he told the story, Nathaniel felt grateful all over again. Grateful for Essence's bravery. Grateful for second chances. Grateful that love had found him when he least deserved it and most needed it. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathaniel and Essence returned to the city where they met. They visited Miss Ruth's grave and laid flowers and told her about their life. They drove past the building where Essence used to clean and where Nathaniel used to rule an empire. It looked smaller somehow, less intimidating. Nathaniel felt nothing but relief that chapter of his life was over. They had dinner at a small restaurant and talked about their dreams for the future. Nathaniel wanted to start a nonprofit helping former criminals reintegrate into society. Essence wanted to write a book about second chances and redemption. They wanted more children and maybe a bigger house and definitely more dogs. But mostly they wanted more days like this one. More mornings waking up together. More evenings watching sunsets. More moments of ordinary joy that felt extraordinary because they had fought so hard to get here. As they walked back to their hotel hand in hand, Nathaniel stopped and turned to Essence. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what, baby?" she asked, though she knew. "For not giving up on me. For seeing something worth saving when everyone else just saw a monster. For loving me before I knew how to love myself." Essence touched his face gently. "You were never a monster, Nathaniel. You were a wounded person doing the best you knew how. All I did was offer you a chance to heal. You did the hard work of actually changing." They kissed there on the city street where their story began. Two people who should never have met, let alone fallen in love. Two people who proved that the human heart is capable of more courage and more change than we can imagine. Their story wasn't about a mafia boss and a janitor anymore. It was about Nathaniel and Essence. Husband and wife, partners, best friends. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and chosen every day to build something beautiful from the broken pieces of their pasts. Back home in Montana, their daughter slept peacefully with her grandmother's name and her parents, courage running through her veins. The dog Hope snored at the foot of her bed. Outside, the window stars blazed in the dark sky. And somewhere in the universe, God smiled at the love story he had written. The one about the janitor who saved the mafia boss's life. The one about the criminal who found redemption through love. The one about two people who taught each other that it's never too late to choose a different path. that grace is real, that change is possible, that love always wins in the end. Their journey had shown that even in the darkest moments, hope can break through. That one act of courage can set off a chain of miracles. That the love between two unlikely people can inspire others to believe in second chances. Nathaniel Donovan had been a name that once struck fear. Now Nathan Carter was a name that brought hope. And Essence Williams had been invisible. Now she was the hero of her own incredible story. On the night their nonprofit finally opened its doors, in a converted rail depot, its brick walls scrubbed clean. Its sign hand-painted by the same teenagers who would soon be mentored there, Nathaniel and Essence stood in the humming quiet after everyone had gone home. The smell of sawdust and coffee lingering like a benediction, and they let the day replay in soft, astonished detail. The ribbon snipped by little Ruth with oversized scissors and bigger dimples. The mayor shaking Nathaniel's hand without knowing he was once the shadow behind so many frightened eyes. The circle of men and women who had done time, some for things they owned and some for mistakes they did not, speaking into a microphone that crackled with the electricity of confession and hope. The moment a woman named Leela stepped from the crowd with hands that trembled and said, "I lost my brother to the streets your family once owned. And I don't know how to look at you without remembering his face and the way Nathaniel, without flinching or defending or disguising, said I don't know if I deserve your gaze. But I will spend the rest of my life carrying it carefully. And if there is a way to repair even one board of the bridge I burned, I will." How Leela's eyes filled, and after a long breath that seemed to pull air from the first day, God called Light. She nodded and whispered, "Then let's begin with his name." And he wrote Jonah on a white card and pinned it above the door, so every volunteer would pass beneath the reminder that this place was not charity but covenant. The way Essence's book sold out at the back table because every chapter read like a hand reaching through the worst night toward morning. Practical and plain-spoken and fierce with a teacher's stubborn faith. Miss Ruth's voice echoing in their bones even though she was gone, "Baby, don't waste the second chance you've been given. Call every chance a first chance for somebody else." And how they both laughed when Hope stole a cupcake and trotted across the polished floor with frosting on her nose as if she were the one who had founded the entire movement. How the FBI agent who once guarded their porch came by off-duty with his wife and set a small envelope in Nathaniel's hand, an old photograph the Bureau had recovered from evidence long ago, repaired at the corners, of a boy and his mother smiling into a son long set, and how Nathaniel felt his past fold. Not shut, but carefully, like a letter placed back in its envelope. Still legible, no longer ruling. Then the lights clicked off, and the vast room fell into that kind of quiet that is not emptiness, but fullness having decided to rest. And they walked the perimeter together, fingertips brushing the cool brick, naming out loud the programs to come, skills classes and counseling. A tool library, a scholarship fund with Lila's chair, a kitchen where men who had learned to cook in prison would teach Saturday, breakfasts to kids who thought patience could not smell like cinnamon, and as they reached the back door, the rumble of thunder stitched the mountains and rain began its clean work, drumming the tin roof like it had the night a bomb blinked, and the future blinked back. Nathaniel turned to Essence with that look she knew, the one that said everything true at once. And he told her a story he had not told himself yet, about how the hardest part of redemption was not testifying against his ghosts but choosing in the untelevised hours to keep laying one honest brick after another, when no one clapped and nothing glittered. And how he had learned, from her and from the small stubborn things of ordinary days, that love is mortar, invisible when it's doing its job, strong enough to hold a life. And Essence, who had learned her own courage could ache and still be courage, rested her palm on the quiet swell of their second child and said, "Then we keep building. Even if the world only ever sees the walls and not the hands that shape them, even if some people never forgive, Even if fear knocks now and then with a familiar voice, we keep answering with light. Outside, a pair of teens from the evening crew dashed back through the rain to retrieve a forgotten backpack. And when they saw Nathaniel and Essence, they froze like kids caught sneaking cookies. Then grinned and waved, unafraid, and Nathaniel felt the simplest pride rise in him. The kind that doesn't need applause because it's busy mopping floors and setting out chairs for tomorrow. Later, at home, Ruth fell asleep with paint flecks on her fingertips and a new word in her bedtime. Prayers repair, and when the house settled and the dog dreamed soft dog dreams. Essence and Nathaniel took out the jar they kept on the mantel, the one labeled miracles we almost missed, and slipped in 2 new slips of paper, one with Jonah's name written in Lila's careful hand, one with the title of a workshop a shy man had pitched that afternoon, How to Start Over. When you can't start over, and they laughed at the perfection of it, because wasn't that the whole point? Then Nathaniel opened the envelope again and traced his mother's face in the repaired photograph, and he whispered, "We're okay, Ma." Not because we outran anything, but because we turned and faced it and found a different way through. And Essence, who had always believed that God loves to write footnotes in human margins, pressed her forehead to his and said, "Tomorrow I to buy more folding chairs, because I have a feeling we'll need them." And it struck him that this was what winning looked like now. Not trophies or headlines, but an extra row of plastic seats and a schedule, smudged with pencil where names were added to the wait list. The storm moved on, leaving the yard jeweled. And dawn came patient and unspectacular, and they stood at the window the way they had once stood in a backyard watching sunrise over a future they could only guess at. And they said thank you in the quiet grammar of people who know the cost. Down the road, the depot sign caught First Light Ruth House, in honor of a woman who believed before it was fashionable, and a pickup pulled in early. A man climbing out with a nervous face and a folder of court papers tucked beneath his arm. And Nathaniel reached for his boots while Essence reached for the coffee, both of them smiling at the ordinary miracle of the day's first knock. At the way love opens doors, not with spectacle, but with hinges that don't squeak. And before he stepped outside, he turned back to her the way he always did, as if there were a ritual to their courage. And she lifted 2 fingers in a blessing he had come to trust. Go gentle. Build true. Come home. And he did, again and again and again, until the story that began in a parking garage and passed through a courtroom and vanished into new names became something better than legend. It became a neighborhood, a habit of hope, a place where a former Mafia boss and a former invisible janitor stood hip to hip at a welcome desk under a wall of names. And every bell that rang meant one more person had chosen, in the slow arithmetic that outlasts empires, to be remade.